Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular town council meeting for Tuesday, September 26, 2017. Please rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Fishbein?
Here.
Laffin?
Here.
Letourneau? Marone?
Here.
Shortell?
Here.
Sullivan?
Here.
Testa? Zandri?
Here.
And Chairman Cervoni.
Here. Councilor Testa advised me that he has a work-related conflict this evening, and Councilor Letourneau also advised me that he has an unavoidable conflict this evening. With that, we'll move on to item 3.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve and accept consent agenda items A through E.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. The consent agenda passes. Item 4, there are no items removed from the consent agenda. On to item 5, public question and answer. Mr. Gross.
Good evening, Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. Through the chair to the town attorney, I guess.
Yes.
2 weeks ago, I asked a question on the Board of Ethics. Nobody's responded to me in those 2 weeks. So I was just wondering, since the town attorney's here, if she can explain what the changes were and who's going to make the decisions on what does this all mean? How it's changed?
I don't know what you're looking at. I don't know what you're talking about.
All right, charter revision.
Okay, you didn't say it was charter revision.
Okay,
I certainly
sorry.
can't answer that question off the top of my head.
Okay, nobody asked you then, okay.
No.
In this, it says Board of Ethics, Section D.
I can tell you, generally speaking.
Because according to the minutes of the meeting,
Yeah.
it appeared that you were one of the writers of this. You were guiding them through this.
No, they told me what they were looking for, and I did prepare a draft, and I believe they also participated in that. And I know the goal was to remove things that don't really belong in the charter, that more procedural aspect of it, which either would be in the ordinance or in the rules of procedure and not needed to be part of the charter itself. So that's, generally speaking, is what I think the goal of the commission was to do. So I did participate in that, yes. I did help
So
draft
what did
that.
they remove from the charter?
Okay. I don't have it. I can't answer that question. I can't.
Who has, it says the Board of Ethics shall have such powers and duties as be set forth in the charter. Where did they go in the charter? Because you made mention in the minutes that things were going to be done by ordinance.
We have an ordinance,
That says that is the Code of Ethics.
right? It's an ordinance, yes.
And so in here, you've added state law. So are you going to be
Right.
following state law then?
We would always be following state law.
So you took out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs and added just a few words. So not even a paragraph. So I'm just asking what was added. Doesn't appear to be anything added here. Who has the power in this Board of Ethics then? Who can make a complaint? Does it stay the same?
It hasn't altered.
All right. So state law meaning what does that mean that you're going to go by state law? So whatever the state law is, we'll use an example. recently there was an issue with Cigna merging with Anthem, or Anthem trying to take over Cigna, I think it was. And the woman who is the insurance commissioner, Wade, worked for one of those companies, and she didn't want to recuse herself, and the Board of Ethics got involved. So would that type of thing happen on a local level?
I believe that circumstance would have been governed by the ethics rules that apply to state employees and officials. So there are other sections of the state statute that would apply on a local level too. For example, the state statute talks about the probable cause procedure, talks about the confidentiality of a complaint when it's first made before probable cause is found. So those types of provisions, which apply presently to municipal, would continue to apply to municipal. So it's not looking to say we're subjected to the ethics rules that are governing state employees and state officials. We don't have the power to do that, and that's not the...
No, I understand that, but
intent.
what I'm saying is, would the same ideas float all the way down to a local level? So,
If the statute says so, yes.
state statute. So anything the state statute says can float down to the local level?
If it says it floats to the local level.
Okay. I'm not following 100%. Okay.
Well,
I know, I understand, but you're coming in blind to it. So I'm just surprised at all these things. So advisory opinions are all...
It really, the substance of the changes is not to change what the powers are. It is to say that there's certain detail in the charter. When the Board of Ethics would actually act on something, you needed to have the charter open and the Code of Ethics opened at the same time, because there was so much detail in the charter and you had to correlate it to what's in the Code of Ethics. It was not necessary. The same way other sections of the charter, it's not necessary to put the gritty detail in a charter. It can be in the ordinance, or it can be in their rules of procedure. That was the intent of the revisions that were made.
So is it in the ordinance now?
Is what in the ordinance?
Probable cause, hearings,
Yes.
violation, are all in the ordinances
It's
now?
my recollection, yes. And I think some of that's in state statute too, but.
So advisory opinions, violations, and appeals, that's all, this is all duplicate?
That's my recollection. The things that were removed, viewed, they don't belong, they don't need to be in the charter. And if to the extent that someone wants to do something to those types of provisions, if they're not, I think they are all in the ordinance, but if, the ordinance can be changed by the council to make any changes to that they wish.
And that's my issue. Then you have the ability to change it if the council, no matter what, I'm not saying this council, but any council down the road, then has the ability to change it, because it's not in the charter. They can change certain things to whatever way they want it to be changed.
It really would just be procedural type things.
But they can change them. Where before, when it's in the charter, you really can't change.
That's correct, that's correct.
And so you're taking away those types of things that then, so why would you take that, why would you have set standards and take them away?
They were procedural issues.
I understand
Which I
that.
just described.
But
They don't need to be in the charter.
But you're
The
just saying, but if
substance
they
of
go...
what the powers of the Board of Ethics did not change in the charter revision. Those are the same powers.
But you're saying
Did
how...
not dilute their powers by that.
But how it's done can be diluted by a council.
Can be changed. If it's not in the charter and it's subject to the ordinance, that's correct.
And I'm just asking, then why?
Because generally, those types of things are not something you would put in the enabling document. That's where you would put, the ordinance is the proper place to put in the procedures.
But they...
The steps.
And I'm not talking, but it was in here before, then somebody at some point... at some point
It
thought
was
it should be
very
there.
difficult, as I said, to take the charter and then take the Code of Ethics and try to match them, the two of them. It was not the best scenario in terms of working.
I'm just saying,
Well, you can disagree, that's fine.
No, I'm not disagreeing, I'm just confused on taking away powers, bringing powers in.
Well, I don't believe their powers were taken away.
Well, it's procedural changes that are being done that could be changed on a majority council one way or another. If they don't like the way certain things being done, they can change procedural changes.
Yeah, and that
to a
could be
way-
for the better.
Or for the worse.
I suppose
Whereas
it
if
could.
it's in here, the people get to decide how the procedures will be done versus 9 people on a
Well,
council.
if the
And that's
council,
what I'm saying.
if the council's going to change an ordinance, there's a public hearing. There's a lengthy process.
I
And
understand.
public gets input.
Well, they get input, but you still just vote on it. You can listen and you can hear blah, blah, blah. And I'm not disrespecting you, but you can hear whatever you want to hear. But you can decide which way you want to go with something. That's your right. You can take input from the public or not take input. And we saw that with the Charter Revision Commission. And what you had to say to the Charter Revision Commission, the majority of the councilors felt that the PUC should be gone to 5. And yet, it wasn't taken as input. I mean, they listened and they disagreed with you. Same thing can happen there.
Well, that's
And
their power. They're not bound to.
And that's the power of the council versus the power of the people.
Right,
that
and the
have
power of the people is to replace the council who create an ordinance with improper or deemed negative procedural rules for the Board of Ethics.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, that's why take it away. Thank you.
Other public comment? Ms. Tata?
Christina Tata, 751 North Farms Road. When the Charter Revision Commission completed its work, I know that the law department made, it was like a one-page summary. Better. It was a one-page summary, just kind of giving a brief synopsis of what all the changes were. Is that going to be distributed? Are we putting that in the newspaper? Can that be posted? I'm just wondering what is going to happen with that, because I think it's very helpful. It was a good synopsis rather, I mean, I obviously encourage everyone to read the minutes and do their due diligence, but I think that was a nice synopsis, and I was just hoping that we were gonna be able to distribute that somehow. Is that going to happen?
Did you approve an explanatory text?
We did.
Okay, so that would go with that. I couldn't remember if you did or not.
We did.
So that would be, should be with the proposed charter. I have to
With the
talk to
ballot?
the town clerk's office as to where that is. I think that actually goes, I think it goes in absentee ballots and then is posted on a poster, but I can look into that. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah, I know, I think I did read that
Yeah,
there's
we
gonna be
did.
posters, but I was just
Right.
hoping, I don't know if the council maybe has the ability to do that, if we could maybe look into having that distributed, or, I know we put
I
like.
think it might
the-
be on the website. I'll have to check, I'll check
Yeah,
into
that'd be good. I know we put like the entire charter in the record journal. I don't know if there's funds to maybe put that one page or something. But I think it just kind of is a simple explanation of the changes. So if you wouldn't mind looking into that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Gross?
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. A quick question then. The council mentioned earlier in the year that they were going to talk to the pension commission, or at least have the pension commission come before them. We're now into technically October, and to see how their, not so much their performance, but what they're doing. And there was an article the other day about CalPERS, which is the California pension, which is a very large pension fund. And they are pretty much all into passive investing, except for their esoteric investing. They can buy shopping centers. I mean, they have tens of billions of dollars. Have you guys gotten any updates on the pension commission, or are you planning on talking to the pension commission and see how they're investing, or do you know how they're investing? For
I've had-
fees?
I've
And
had-
the reason that CalPERS has gone that way, sorry to interrupt you, is because of fees. That they felt that the performance and fees can now outweigh, and they can buy the best of the best. I mean, they are one of the top 5 pension funds in the country. So, sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, I can answer now?
I said sorry I interrupted you, but I was just trying to make the whole thing full, why CalPERS is doing what they're doing.
Yep. I've had some conversations with Mr. Bose about talking to the pension commission members about getting together. And so he's kind of been my conduit. And with the summer, we lost track of those conversations. I know with vacations and the like, it's hard to get people together, but I will follow up with Mr. Bose again.
No, I'm just saying, because as every year goes by, you're paying additional fees that are greater than passive versus active, and performance overall. And 2% makes a big difference on $100 million. And I see Jason smiling. You know, it means tens of millions of dollars over the life of the thing. And every year you don't do anything, or they don't do anything, there's more money that the town eventually is going to have to put into that pension fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Twice? 3 times. We'll close the public question and answer period and move on to item 6.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the job description for Public Works Building Maintenance Technician.
Seconded by Councilor Shortell. Good evening.
Councilors, good evening.
Good evening.
For the record,
Jim Hudd, Town Personnel Director.
Henry McCauley, Public Works Director.
We're here tonight to seek your approval about a new job description classification, building maintenance technician, which would be in the Department of Public Works. It's a position which has been a long time coming, especially down in Public Works with all the public buildings that have to be maintained and the supervision of activities that are going on there in terms of building maintenance. So we feel it's a position, you know, that is necessary to free Henry as well as the general foreman up to attend to more management responsibilities and the day-to-day maintenance activities within the public buildings can be delegated to this individual.
so it's my understanding that you have somebody in place that meets this description. Is it essentially doing that work already? Am I correct to believe that?
That's correct. I'll let Henry address it more specifically if he needs to.
Yes, we have an individual who's been performing a lot of these tasks.
And so, based upon what I know about that individual's talents and the work that the individual's already doing in this capacity, to me it made absolute sense to formalize this position, because my perception is that sometime in the next several years that person may retire, and having this position already described and in place will put us in a position where we can hire somebody to replace that person.
Correct.
So it certainly made sense to me. On to Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good
So,
evening.
from the cover letter, I couldn't tell, but I think you just answered the question. It's not a new job description, it's a description for a new job.
Correct.
Okay. And it's a collectively bargained job?
That's correct. It would be a member of Local 1183 of AFSCME.
And what is, so somebody already in that position, are they a member of the union presently?
Yes.
So how did they become a member of the union presently if that job was not described in the contract?
Well, the position sort of evolved over time because the function exists and there wasn't a position set up in the current classification plan, but over time, positions become transformed from what they were initially hired for and then become something else. And that's what this position is now. I just want to stress that we're creating the position of building maintenance technician, but the personnel rules are going to be followed and that it's going to be posted as a competitive exam, and whoever is qualified and wants to participate in the process, they're going to be eligible to do so. So we're not giving a position to somebody, we're creating a job and then it'll be filled on a competitive basis.
Okay, so I'm just trying to follow along because I have some knowledge of collective bargaining here. And we have within this union a closed shop and we say, these are the things within this shop. And I'm trying, how do you create a quasi position at the same pay rate or a different pay rate? It appears
It's a
to me.
different pay rate. It's a different pay rate. The position has been slotted in the Public Works seniority unit within the contract in accordance with where it falls in relation to other positions that are in that organizational hierarchy. So it's slotted between the maintainer 4 and a working crew leader position. So it's not in essence a working crew leader because at times they'll be working by themselves. There'll be times when they'll have a crew they'll be working with. So, in terms of compensation theory, we can establish whatever we want to be the compensation level, and it makes sense. It's it's midpoint between a maintainer 4 and a working crew leader.
So the person who's doing this job presently, what is their classification?
Maintainer 4,
And there is a job description for a maintainer 4.
yes.
And I'm to understand, you want to say something else?
But it bears very little resemblance to this job here.
Oh, that's exactly my point.
Yeah.
In that somebody is hired as a maintainer 4 with a certain job description, but we have, by some action, morphed that individual into a totally different job situation.
That's correct.
Okay. I hope not too many people are listening to this, but, so then I was reading this job description, and I would expect that the law department reviewed the first paragraph. Janet? No?
No,
So the law doesn't read this stuff?
no.
Okay. The first paragraph doesn't make sense. I mean, there's a lot of words. There's some words that have to do with working and doing things with public works, but, just looking at the third sentence, there's tense problems. It's intended that we're gonna post this up on a board somewhere?
Yes, it's going to be posted as a competitive exam.
Okay, I just don't think this is a good product, so, the rest of it's generally okay, but the first paragraph is just a little messy, so anyway. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Counselor Zandri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
So, kind of coming off of Councilor Fishbein's comments, I want to make sure I understand. So the job that the individual is doing sort of evolved over time. Is that true?
Yes.
And because we don't have a designation or classification, if the individual retired without this classification, there's really no way to, and I'm going to use the word make, but I mean, you might have the maintainer 4 or the working crew leader. You really wouldn't be able to say to either of those individuals, we need one of you to learn how to do this, because in theory, it's almost a different job from both. But by creating the position, you're able to either request of one of them if they're interested because they fit some of the classification, or go outside within the union, somebody that could come in and fill the slot, take the test, pass it, and then become the position because it's been created. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it would be continued into the future.
And so we're not really hiring a new person, we're taking one person and reclassifying them. Is that true?
Yes.
And we're not adding another
We're
in.
not adding another.
No, that's not correct.
Oh,
We are creating a job description that will be posted for filling. Now, if no one inside qualified for some reason, then the decision would have to be made whether we go outside to hire someone and create another position in Public Works, or we wouldn't fill it. If someone inside qualifies, then that person would fill the position. But it does not increase automatically the number of people in Public Works, nor does it automatically mean anything other than this job description describes duties that have to be performed for Public Works to fulfill its mission. And given the technicalities, the expertise needed, it deserves a job description that isolates this by itself. But the way you were expressing it, it sounded like this was creating something for someone, and there's no automatic nature to this. It has to be tested for.
Okay, so let me clarify my question, because maybe I wasn't being clear about it. If the individual that's currently doing the role was to get the job because they passed the qualifications for it, it's not as if we're short a maintainer 4 and we're going to be hiring somebody in the maintainer branches to fill up from the bottom or somewhere in the middle. We're staffed appropriately now. If the same individual were to get the new classification, there's no change in the workforce. Would that be a fair assumption?
Correct.
Okay, and then in the future, if this individual were to retire, as long as a similar scenario were to happen, where it's somebody within the force, they may move up and we may or may not, based on demand at the time, fill the other position.
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I understood, and that kind of plays along to what the mayor said. It's not, we're not guaranteeing the individual there is going to get it, and it's not necessarily creating a new job, but it could in a scenario where we bring somebody in from the outside and nobody moves up, and or in a scenario where somebody moves up and we do or do not fill it.
Correct.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Jim, Henry.
Evening.
Thanks for coming for your monthly beating. Hey, couple of questions. I see supervision exercised, but I'm guessing this is not going to be primarily a supervisory position, correct?
That's correct.
But the language exists that this person could be used in a supervisory role, and if so, we would have to probably pay up to crew leader, or no?
No.
No, he would supervise people of a lesser grade.
Okay. As far as certifications, it appears that this position will be overseeing some contractors possibly who are doing HVAC and so forth. Is there any certification requirements that the successful candidate have any certifications in any of these disciplines that require a certification of the people doing the work?
No, that's not being proposed.
Okay. The head count was already talked about. If there is a successful candidate in the department, we would not be increasing head count. We wouldn't be backfilling basically a maintainer 4.
That's correct.
Okay. And to the mayor's point, he made a good point. I picked up on that as well.
Just to clarify, the budget indicates number of people in a department.
Right.
So if we were to want to increase that number, we would have to come back to the council to amend the budget to reflect a larger number. So it's not just a discretion of the department that, oh, well, we now have a maintainer 4 position open, so we'll bring in another person. That can't be done without amending the budget.
Yeah, I don't see how anything I said could give the perception that I meant that. Okay.
I don't think you were saying that,
Okay.
but overall the discussion, it's not a simple matter of, filling a position. If it's not in harmony with the budget total, then it has to come back to the council.
I agree with that point. Okay, and look, I'm all for doing this, but Jim, to Councilor Fishpoint's point, you may want, even after approval, just wordsmith that first paragraph, just a bit. There is a couple of items there that you may want to change. And I'm good, thank you, gentlemen, I certainly support it.
Questions or comments from the public? There being none, I bring it back to the Counselor Fishbein, did I see your hand?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, thank you. Why would this individual have some sort of licensure, HVAC, as Counselor Sullivan had mentioned?
Well, they wouldn't be actually doing the work, they'd be coordinating the work with contractors. So they're not actually going in and installing, heating, ventil, and air conditioning systems, but they would be overseeing the work that's being done by professionals. Similar to what's being done now.
Well, I'm not saying what's being done now is correct, it's just what's being done now. If the supervisor, so to speak, is going to hold someone to a standard, do they not have to prove knowledge of that standard? Wouldn't that be appropriate?
That's what's taking place now.
Understood. But that individual is...
We're not necessarily looking for an individual with multiple licenses. It's a well-rounded experience in these areas.
Okay, so at the point that there is perhaps a dispute between a contractor and this unlicensed supervisor, how does that dispute get?
Well, our contractors I'll take an example of the HVAC, are under contract to the town. We have bids, we have specifications in the bids as to what they do, what they can charge for the work they do, etc. And we could rely on that if we needed to take a contractor to task.
So then you wouldn't need this individual to oversee that work. I'm just trying to figure out.
Well, it's just that an example would be in the winter and the summer, we get calls at Public Works. This room is cold, that room is too hot, and we could send this individual to take a look at it because they have knowledge of it rather than call a contractor. They could usually make an adjustment. It could be a thermostat, it could be a minor adjustment on a damper that would save us calling a contractor.
Okay, and then that individual who is somewhat knowledgeable about cold rooms and hot rooms says,
Exactly.
well, I can't figure it out, so I'm going to call the contractor. So the contractor comes down and he says, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But the person who's approving that, which is this position, isn't licensed and doesn't...
Well, our contract, in our bid specs, they're pretty detailed in the bid specs as to what contractors have to do to correct certain situations.
Maybe I can help. It would be similar to a clerk of the works. Clerk of the works is not licensed in all matter of what is going on for any type of construction, but is informed enough to know what should happen in what sequence, make sure that whatever is work being done does not interfere with the mechanical capability of other aspects of what is being remedied or renovated, does not interfere in any way, is done properly in accordance with their understanding of what would be commonplace in that work environment. Clerk of the Works doesn't have all the licenses of everyone who does everything, but they certainly have authority to oversee that, and if there's something wrong, they report it to either the architect or the owner. In this case, this individual would report it to either their department head or their supervisor and see that it's remedied. So to me, it's more like a clerk of the works at times rather than an actual licensing of ability to install heating, air conditioning, or some other type of equipment.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Vice Chairman Laffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are we responsible for wordsmithing this right now? Because as Councilor Fishbein pointed out and Councilor Sullivan, the first paragraph's it's missing a couple words. And I don't know if we're trying to avoid using the words this position or this person, but it just needs to be tweaked a little. I just want to make sure, do we need to do something about that now before we approve it, or can that just be cleaned up as a...
I mean, if you have a word that you want to...
I don't care, I just want to
I mean,
make sure that this isn't like, nope, you got to use this, we said this black and
No, I
white.
mean, if you have a word that you want to, you know,
Mayor?
make a change.
I think the main thing was, it
Position.
appears that one of the verbs is in the wrong tense. And if the verbs aren't in the correct tense, then it would be the same word, but it would just be, instead of gets, or
Right.
whatever.
So my question is, do we need to change that now before we vote on this, or can we just let it go and have it corrected later? It's a grammatical thing.
I think you can just say with such grammatical corrections as may be necessary.
Okay. Well, then, I would like my motion to be amended as such.
Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
Okay.
Can I,
Councilor Fishbein.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just, since these things get contested, we have collective bargaining, we have grievances, may I suggest that Janice takes a look at it at the end? I mean, I would have expected that that's how we normally do this, so.
Well, I just want you to know that before it came to the council, the job description that you have in front of you was approved by the union.
Okay.
So if there's any concern about that, I mean, it's...
They're okay with it.
So it's already been approved.
All right, then, if there is nothing further, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll first on the amendment?
Yes. Fishbein?
Yes.
Laffin?
Yes.
Letourneau? Marone?
Yes.
Shortell?
Yes.
Sullivan?
Yes.
Testa? Zandri?
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni?
Yes, and now the roll on the motion as amended.
Fishbein?
Yes.
Laffin?
Yes.
Letourneau? Marone?
Yes.
Shortell?
Yes.
Sullivan?
Yes.
Testa? Zandri?
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni?
Yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. On to item 7. I think that involves you too, Mr. McCully.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the bid waiver request for ATC Group Services LLC in the amount of $13,330 from the Public Works Department.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sullivan. Mr. McCully, what have we here?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Again. Last year, the state of Connecticut DEEP created another townwide permit, municipal stormwater permit for all the towns in the state of Connecticut. And it was issued 2016, it became effective July 1 of this year. The new permit covers the entire town. It involves street sweeping, catch basin cleaning. I'll give you an example of 6 categories that they've listed in addition to that. Public education and outreach, public involvement and participation, illicit discharge detection and elimination, construction site stormwater control, post-construction stormwater management, pollution prevention, and good housekeeping. The ATC group that was the contractor hired to create our permit and submit it to the state on time held several meetings with my public works, law, engineering, planning and zoning, and inland wetlands, because we're all involved in this. And it goes as far as Janice's department with all the legal aspects of illicit discharge and so forth. And it just makes sense to have this company continue the contract and get us through this. I'm of the mind that once we go through a full season with this engineering company, environmental company, that we could, in the next fiscal year, put this out to competitive bidding. But this would allow us a continuation. This individual knows all the participants in this within the town, and would just give us a smooth transition to complete this.
Attorney Small, do you have anything to add?
Yes, the new MS4 permit is substantially more complicated than in prior years. The level of activity that we have to engage in, plan for, is far beyond anything that we've done before. And as Henry said, you know, law, wetlands, planning, zoning, engineering, public works, we are meeting on this on a somewhat regular basis to get us through. We had to meet to get through just doing the permit requirements. Now we have to implement all the various steps of the permit. So for this first year where this is new and we need to get a lot of things going, a lot of it is really a carryover from the creation of what our plan was for the permit. So to keep this firm intact for this fiscal year makes a lot of sense at what I would think is a very reasonable price. To get us through this first year, get over a lot of the initial steps of the plan, and then it can go out to bid. It wouldn't be a problem. But I think it's really important that we stay where we are for the time being, because we really have a great deal of work to do under this permit.
Mayor?
With great understatement, I will report to you that, as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the bigger frustrations that local government is faced with when there's less and less money and all we get is more and more requirements. At one point, we expected this to be in the neighborhood of $1 million new cost. There was a lot of discussion with the state and back and forth from CCM and a variety of other municipalities, and you know, some of the requirements were altered, but it's another example of there's just a unwillingness to recognize there's extreme financial distress at the local level, and too many state departments just say, hey, you know, you people have to do it because EPA or someone tells us this is necessary. But all for a good cause, but it comes with cost.
Thank you. Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Henry, how did we get involved with ATC to begin with?
We put out for proposals to submit the necessary permit.
Okay, and that was because the council approved proposals instead of bid?
It was under the bid limit. It was...
But at the time of putting out the proposals, did you anticipate being underneath the bid limit?
I can't remember how that was almost 2 years ago we did this.
Because what's the bid limit presently?
7,500.
Okay. So what's before us tonight is an additional anticipated in this year $13,000, well, in excess of $13,000.
Correct.
So we didn't know that at the time?
Well, we were meeting, as Janice stated, we had several meetings and...
But at some point, somebody's got to pick them to be part of the meeting. So the pick happens before the meetings.
Yeah. Well, I think the working with ATC on submitting our permit for us gave us a chance to evaluate what kind of contractor we were going to be dealing with. And all the parties involved agreed that they were very knowledgeable and would be an excellent pick to get us through the first year or so of this permit.
Okay, my problem with this, and we see this a lot of times, we get locked in with somebody. So,
Well, we're
We
only
spent
going to be
another-
locked in until July of next year.
yeah, well, we spent another $13,000 on this project, you're at 16 plus. And then the next time it's gonna be, well, they've done so much work for us already, they know the town, they've dealt with everybody, let's just do a bid waiver. And the problem I have is, perhaps we shouldn't be here with this one group at this point. So nothing's been submitted at this point, correct? There's still talks?
Our permit was due in April, and our permit has been submitted,
Okay,
and it became effective July 1.
so to do that, that was $3,500?
Yes,
Okay, so,
33, I think it was.
excuse me?
I think it was around 33.
Okay, 3330. So why are we anticipating an additional 13,330?
This is the estimate that we got from our consultant to take us to July 1 of next year. You have to we've already started inspecting catch basins in the town of Wallingford. We have 6,500. We've identified 1,006 that need to be cleaned. This all has to be documented for the state of Connecticut. We have to put the dates down that we swept a certain street on a certain day, and we've already started the compliance with this. And to me, ATC will take us through this, and then we will have everything that we need to put out a bid in the next fiscal year.
Wait, so ATC is not the one who's cleaning out catch basins?
No,
That's the
Public
town?
Works is doing that.
Yes. So they're the author of the permit. It was
Correct.
already approved.
Yes.
Okay. So what additional work do you anticipate for another $13,000 in the next year?
Well, they have to do screening of streams. They have to take the water samples, and they have to be analyzed. They have to submit those. And it's as I stated in this, it's very varied. They would have to work, for an example, would be Erin O'Hare and inland wetlands. If you go in and build a 20-house subdivision, that land has to be monitored for runoff.
So ATC will be doing that?
Well, it has to. They would participate in these things.
Okay, so
Because
how,
there's rules that, I'm trying to state some examples, but I can't give you all of the rules that the state of Connecticut is requiring of the town.
no, I'm just trying to figure out what ATC is doing. So there's a new subdivision going in somewhere in town, and it's 20 houses, residential. What would ATC do with regard to that new subdivision?
Well, if Erin O'Hare wanted their engineer to come over and make sure that the runoff is being contained as requested by not as requested, but as demanded by the state in our permit, because you have to provide for proper drainage and so forth in these areas. They would be able to tell you if you're doing anything wrong.
Okay, so presently, those kinds of things happen, because I've been before inland wetlands and I've watched their meetings, and usually it's the burden of the applicant to show to the commission that the runoff is appropriate, or the amount of impervious
Yes.
surface, that kind of stuff. So is this is a new function of ATC? Because I don't see it being any part of it.
This is part of the 6 areas I read off to you. Janice is involved in ordinances in this, and this is why ATC is a very experienced company in this, and to me, it's the obvious choice. I mean, I can't give you every detail of this, because it's certainly not my background. I know a little bit about it, but it's certainly not my background. But I think from all the meetings that we've had with all the players in this, that we have a contractor who's going to steer us in the right direction. And
Yeah, I have familiarity in the commercial sense of stormwater permits. So I've been through that, and I know there's plenty of outfits in the state of Connecticut that are involved in those. But what I heard with regard to the scenario of the 20 divisions, the 20 unit subdivision, was if inland wetlands wanted to show, but that's not a state requirement, right? So I don't know, and I don't want to belabor this, I don't know what ATC would have to
number
do with
4 on their list is construction site stormwater control. That's from the state of Connecticut. That's not from the town of Wallingford.
So ATC would put into the stormwater plan what is planned to happen, or what inland wetlands would perhaps require of applicants.
They would be, we would get guidance from them. That would be part of their job.
So how is that different? I think that's already part of the plan that was approved last year for a fifth of what is anticipated to be spent this year.
But this is what the state of Connecticut wants. It's not whether or not the town of Wallingford already does that. The state of Connecticut wants this included and part of their demands from the town.
So
Mr. Chairman, I think the change here is the testing, the reporting, all of these things that might have happened without a report going to DEP now requires a report to go to DEP. So someone has to be maintaining records on all of this and making sure that that's reported on an annual, if not more frequent basis, back to the state. So it's a constancy of it, including the testing of streams, whether there's illicit discharges in streams. And there's issues surrounding that whole subject that I won't get into right now, but I have real problems with. The state is, well, just say we do need the assistance because there's a lot of record keeping that now is expected from municipalities to reflect what they are doing. And Public Works is not structured to be doing that, not with the record keeping. Certainly they can go out and clean a catch basin, but to maintain the detail and the volume of records that now are expected by the state DEP is just beyond our capability.
So the last thing that I wanted to bring up about this is there's overlap here between water, sewer, and general government. What is the water and sewer department's part of this, and perhaps taking some of the financial burden?
I'm not involved with them at all on this.
Okay, so nobody's discussed.
They're not involved with stormwater, but they have been, they do their watershed inspections, so they can be of assistance to us in terms of what we're required to do under the permit. You know, they do their inspections to make sure people aren't doing certain things, but they're not in charge of stormwater. That's what this is about. And the whole purpose of keeping this firm for one more year before going out to bid is because this is the firm that helped us create the plan for the permit. We're now in the first year of that permit. There are all kinds of requirements we did not have before, and we want the same firm that helped us draft this to guide us through the first year. After that, I don't see any reason why I couldn't go out to bid. But we want to basically use the same firm who helped create the plan, help us set up how we're going to comply with the plan, because we have to do an annual report each year and keep all kinds of records. We want that group to help us set it all up over the course of the first year, and then it's free to be done by anybody else. This could be a very expensive proposition. I've seen some of the other plans done by other towns that are like this thick, hired major engineering firms to do them, and God knows what cost. So we view this to be a reasonable solution for the next year only, and then it can go out to bid without any problems. But we need the consistency because a year runs by very quickly, and we have a lot of work that we have to get done, mandated by the state in that time, and we want the same firm for consistency purposes. That's it, and then it can go out to bid.
Mr. Chair, I'm not going to belabor this, but I have a problem with how we got to the skirting under the public bid situation. And I think anybody would have anticipated it was going to be over that. And I know that a year from now, I'm going to be hearing, if I'm still up here, we have to stay with this group because they've done so much work, because we hear it all the time. So.
And you have us on tape saying otherwise, right? And I'm sure you'll produce it at that time, correct? So we're all set. A year from now, it would have gone out to bid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For my edification, is there a limited list of vendors that you can use for this? Do they have to be approved by the state?
There's a lot of engineering firms, environmental engineering firms.
Austin O'Neill is doing them for some, and just think of what that cost. No offense.
To whom? Okay, any other questions from the council? Questions from the public? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin.
Yes.
Materno, Marone,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Testa, Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCully. You have a good evening. Next up is item 8.
I move we approve carrying forward the unspent balance of $752,763.25 of the Board of Education operating funds into the 2017-2018 1% account.
Is there a second?
Second.
Good evening.
Good evening. So we'll introduce ourselves.
Please.
Roxanne McKay, Board Chair.
Sal Menzo, Superintendent.
Dominic Barone, Business Manager.
So we're here this evening. It's an annual event, which is basically we come forward to you to share with you the request to carry over the balance up to 1% of the appropriated budget. So this year it's just over $700,000, about 7.5, that we're asking to move into the 1% account, which has been the practice for the last 3 years.
So that's just short of 1% of what the budget was.
It's more than a quarter, so 0.75% of the budget.
Okay. I'll allow questions from the council at this point. Councilor Marone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, folks. Certainly this has been the practice of the council. I guess my question is really for Janice, and that is, with the financial situation that we're potentially in and the potential loss of state money, a substantial amount from education, would there be, do we have a choice here, I guess, to not move the money forward, or is there a way that we can lock this money down in such case that if we were to lose a substantial amount of money? Go ahead, Sally.
Well, actually, what we were recommending tonight is that the use be, the majority of the funds, $700,000, be put aside in the 1% account for special education, potential over expenditure or needs. Not necessarily over expenditure, but the state, as you recall, last fall, reduced our allocation by over $300,000. And by doing so, what they did is they raised the threshold by which we had to meet out of district or special ed costs. So the 4.5%, that threshold went up, which there was a loss of over $300,000 last October. So what we're trying to do is be proactive, ask the town council to approve the 1%, but our goal would be to put $700,000 of the $752,000 into a fund for special education solely to be used in that for that purpose. The other 52,000 would be used for technology. But that was our goal. We want to be proactive because we know right now, due to the state of special education, we are at a deficit. We're going to assume that. We're not filling positions, we're not doing all those traditional things. But as you know from your time on the board, special education is a very volatile number. 1 month it could be in the red, 1 month it could be a little bit less in the red, and then it trends because of transportation, as well as PPTs that occur during the year, as well as new students that come into the district. So this was actually trying to be a proactive move, so we didn't have to come back to the council in the event that there is a shortage. In addition, this money is sustained in that account at the end of the year. We could not move it from special ed purposes, so it could, if it wasn't used, the $700,000 wasn't used this year, it would be a seed money that could be used if there's an overage in future years. So we wouldn't be looking to take it from the special ed and moving it into something else at the end of the year. Our goal would be to keep this as an account to basically look at potential overruns or unexpected expenditures due to new students moving into our district or other circumstances.
Okay, so just to be crystal clear then, your plan is to use this for operational expenses then for the next year potentially? If there's
It's hard to say. Yes, I would say yes, the short answer.
It is a departure from.
Right, from.
Correct.
Typically what we've done, Joe, as you know, is it is a departure from our past practice, which is non-recurring expenditures. A lot of times towards technology, but non-recurring, you're right. So this is a departure from what we have normally done, but again, we're trying to be proactive and kind of have seed money, if you will. So you're right.
Thank you very much. And I understand we certainly have a circumstance this year that's unlike prior years. So, thank you.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess I want to finish off the question. I mean, do we have choices here? Can we just suspend this? Do we have to decide it now? I mean, where are we on this?
Well, I can't speak operationally for what the effect might have on the school system, but I can tell you this is a huge component in the production of our financial statements.
What is that?
For the year-end audited statements. In other words, if you don't act on it tonight and just hold off, or...
Well, if we don't act on it tonight, none of us walks away with the money. The town still has the money. So it, if anything, I would think, would be attributable to Board of Education money appropriated but not expended, something like that. How does it, I don't understand how.
Are you asking how this is treated in the financial statements? I'm kind of having a hard time grasping.
Well, no, you said that it affects the audit, we got to deal with this, so I'm just trying to figure out why.
Because if you do approve it tonight, we could basically move one step closer to completing the audit process. If you don't act on it, then that's sort of still in limbo until you do act on it.
Well, how is it affected if we don't act on it? The money is still there.
Are you speaking not acting, a lack of action to deny, to not accept?
No, lack of
action. Or are
action.
you just holding off until the budget process is complete at the state, or?
Yeah.
I don't, okay.
Tabling the item, per se.
Thank you, that helps. If you table the item, it's just a matter of when you want to get back to the item. Like I said, I can't answer for the folks in the center table how that might affect their operations now, but I mean, we don't have a problem waiting another meeting or so, but I don't know what
I just,
I don't know what your boss up in Hartford's going to be doing.
I really don't understand how that could possibly affect the audit, but the three scenarios we have are we approve, we deny, or we defer. So obviously, if we approve, that goes through and they can do whatever they want with the money, perhaps with some caveat under the state statute. If we deny, what is the effect of that?
If you deny, there is no effect on us. I mean, it's just a different categorization of fund balance, and the surplus is larger by $750,000.
Okay, and if we defer to, let's say, January 1st?
If you defer it, by state statute, we're supposed to have the audit to OPM by 12/31. So if you deferred it to 1/1/18, that would be a little bit later than than the state statute calls for. There are provisions within the statute which allow a municipality to apply to OPM for a 1-month extension for your audit. We try not to use that unless there's a big problem. I don't think I've ever had to use it here in Wallingford. I had to use it once in my career regarding a computer changeover that didn't go as planned. But anyway, because the $752,000 and change is a classification within the reserves of the town. If the council authorizes it tonight or in the future, that is a part of our reserve, if you will, sort of like what we speak about at the budget time as our appropriations in force. This is treated the same way in the financial statements of the municipality, the audited statements, as an appropriations in force. So, and if you deny it, this is going to go into what we call the unassigned reserves, the unassigned fund balance, the free fund balance.
So you can't show a Board of Education surplus for the purpose of auditing?
Sure we can, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing, if you approve and or deny, that just depends, that's just going to change our classification within our audit report.
Okay, I'm just...
If you defer to a different point in time, it's just a matter of when do you think the council would entertain that motion again so that we can put the audit to bed. I don't have a problem waiting. I can't speak for Sal and Rox and Dominic, but our financials will be ready, almost ready for release at a certain point. Our auditors are coming in to finish up later next month. But if this is still out there waiting, we don't have a problem with it. It's just classifying it one area versus another in our financial statements.
Okay, so at this point, we stand here that the Board of Education was appropriated a certain amount of money for last year's fiscal year.
Correct.
When it ended June 30th, they had $752,000 and change in unexpended from those funds.
That's correct.
I.e. a surplus.
That's correct.
So why can't you just close the books for the audit purpose, showing the surplus in the Board of Ed? We
will. But now it's,
okay,
but it's the classification on our balance sheet as to what happens with the $752,000. It's either going to be unassigned, which is sort of our free reserves, which the council is free to appropriate in the future, or it's part of what we call designated, for, just like we do for the appropriations in force. So for us, it's like I said, and that's not it's not a big deal at all for us.
So if we deferred this, we could designate it as unassigned. And then at the time that we have an answer, so you would be able to close the books, this money is unassigned.
Yes.
And then at some point in the future, we could say, here's 752, put it in the account.
That's correct.
Or we got whacked by the state and, we're going to spend it elsewhere.
That's correct.
Okay.
And if you wanted to defer while waiting for future information from either the school system here or the state, the governor's office, and ultimately the legislature, again, we don't have a problem with that, but just to meet the state statutory deadline of 12/31 for the audit, I'd ask you guys to maybe act maybe in November at the latest if you could. It's not going to stop our audit. It's not going to, it's just a classification on the balance sheet.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And we can hold off this is not going to stop the audit process or the production of the reports. It's just how we're going to classify it.
Councilor Sullivan.
If I may, I think Dr. Menzo wanted to speak, so Dr. Menzo, you sure?
I'm positive.
You're good? Okay. Thank you for coming up here this evening. This is a yearly thing, right? We do together over this. Look, I think it's great to discuss the options on what we could do with the money. But I think there's no better place to put it than in the 1% account. I don't know how much longer we're going to continue to see money like this available. As state fundings get cut, I think we're on a short track here. $752,000, almost $753,000 is a lot of money. And Dr. Menzo, you targeting $700,000 to special ed. Well, I think that's the right place for that money to go. I would hope the majority of my colleagues up here support moving this to the 1% account. I don't see what we'll call surpluses like this in the coming years. And I can't think of a better place to invest our money than in our kids. And some may disagree, I'm okay with that. But I would encourage my colleagues to approve this evening to get this money in the 1% account. Thank you.
Councilor Shortell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Roxanne, Sal. Yeah, I'm a little confused because I'm kind of with Councilor Sullivan, where I thought this is just a routine thing. I guess what's confusing to me is why each year we put the money in the 1% account. Generally, you spend it on technology.
Or maintenance.
Or maintenance, one-time expenses.
Correct.
I recognize that there's concern, I mean, there was concern last January at your last budget development session about special ed costs. So that was a concern even before the whole mess with the state. So I know that's been so I guess I'm just confused about why does it matter what you're gonna do with it? Why are you telling us?
Just being transparent.
Okay, I mean, I don't know that, I mean, it's money that was left over. This is what we usually do with it. So whether you're gonna use it for special ed or for iPads, it's your money.
True, but again, just trying to be transparent because we're trying to be prudent and not thinking with the potential cuts that are going to occur that we're going to go use it frivolously. We're concerned.
Right.
Because we don't know where IDA grants are going to come in, where the reimbursement's going to come in. Special ed seems to be I don't want to say the easy place the state is cutting, but it's the place they're cutting. And if it's not actual per pupil reimbursement, it's the transportation. And that's just as costly sometimes to the services for a student in district, never mind out of district. So we're just trying to be proactive, and to be honest, I have to say our new business manager brought this idea forward, and we discussed it at the board level, and we thought, that's being thoughtful to the process.
And it's appreciated. So typically, though, the way this works, though, is you have to spend the money by June 30th.
No, the money can stay in the account. So that's why we saw this as also a potential benefit, because if we're gonna stay within our budget that was allocated to us this year, we're gonna do the best we can. If there's a reason for us to need more than what we were budgeted, this would be there. At the end of June, July 1st, it'll still stay in that special ed funds that next year, again, trying to stay within our budget, but you never know what happens. Again, the state could cut. There could be students who happen to come into community that need additional resources. It would be there as a safety net.
So it would function, so let's say next summer you end up with a $500,000 surplus, I'm just making up a number. That's about what you've run.
Yeah, usually.
Give or take. So let's say you have $500,000 surplus and you want to put that into next year's 1% account. That doesn't accrue with this amount?
No, we could reallocate that to different areas. So like the first year it occurred, we had different areas, and we worked with Mr. Bose to set up those accounts. So some of it was, if you remember, some asbestos abatement. There was some really exciting items. And then we had technology in there. So those funds were expended, and then the next year new accounts were set up.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sal.
No worries.
Certainly. As I listened to Councilor Shortell have his discussion with you, I thought about what was different about the 1% this year. And I think you initiated your presentation by acknowledging that we are facing uncertainty of the ECS grant funding, and your consideration of the use of the 1% this year is to take into consideration the fact that you anticipate sharing in the loss. And so if you can control or put a stopgap in a certain area of the anticipated loss, you've identified special education. It's an item where you were shorted funding in the last allocation.
Yes.
And so you want to preserve the program. So you're anticipating that this could go all bad,
Yes,
and at least you've got $700,000 to preserve the special education program.
correct.
Perfectly said.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Menzo, what's the tabling effect? If this is tabled tonight, how does that affect you?
I guess the concern that I would have is just that it puts us in a situation where we don't have that there as a safety net. Right now, to be honest, our budget for special ed is running just around $1 million in the red.
In the red?
In the red. Because of changes in placements, new students to the school district, reimbursement rates, because the student could be in the district, but then if they go to a different placement, the threshold is all thrown off, transportation. Yeah. So there's a concern there. I mean, we're working within our budget, as I said, and we're not replacing positions. We've already made some reductions in terms of other areas. We've changed a lot of clerical positions. So we're working to stay within this budget, but we don't know what's going to happen next week. And if they decide at the state to start reducing special ed, now that $1 million could become 1.3, 1.4. So this is to cover that other portion in the event that we need it.
Okay. And my next question was the special ed number, which you got to. Going back and forth, Councilor Sullivan said that there's no better place. And yes, special education makes sense. I think, well, then, if there's no better place and we may not see numbers like this again, then that's cause to kind of like hold our horses and figure out what's going on. But as you've already indicated, you've already taken the steps, and then as Chairman Cervoni was mentioning, to break with, and when I was on the Board of Ed, the pastime of not spending money like this on recurring expenses, on operational expenses. And in a way, you're just saying, we're going to use last year's surplus to cover what we're not getting this year from Hartford, expecting the worst case scenario, not even the worst case scenario, just
a scenario that we might actually finally get.
A loss, yeah. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate that forwardness. That's it for me right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Zandri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I just want to clear up one thing that Councilor Shortell said, because it kind of confused me if I heard it the wrong way. There's only one 1% account, is that correct? There's not like multiple accounts?
No, there's one 1% account that gets added to each year, but it's distributed across different projects.
Okay.
So what we do is the business manager, myself, Mr. Bose, we sit down and we delineate what those projects are. But there's only one account, you're absolutely correct.
And it can never, so in the example that he gave where you had money in it now and maybe another 500,000 coming in, again, that was just an example, it couldn't, the totality of the account, the cash in there, couldn't go above that 1%. Is that correct?
I don't think that's, Mr. Bose would know best.
The statute is quite vague, as I remember it, and I was just looking for a copy. I think I had a copy upstairs, but it's 1%, up to a maximum of 1% of the operating budget of that. It's on an annualized basis. So what was the budget? 900?
Yeah, the way I understood it, but you may have better clarification.
$96 million was the budget, give or take. So the 1% would be approximately 960,000.
That could go in annually. So you can have, like, we could put in the budget, say $900,000 this year, and then if it's not all used, you're allowed, the way I think when we originally reviewed this, that's the way
I saw it too, yeah.
Okay, so in that mindset, it's more like that's the most you could put into each year, but in theory, the account could continue to grow larger.
Yes.
All right,
Per my reading of the statute.
Right,
Which I said is
yeah,
quite
that's
vague, and
fine.
I don't know if the superintendent's associations have,
I think that's this similar, we
Yeah.
all worked together on this, and the mayor was very helpful on that.
I think that that's the way it's meant to work. Obviously, in a subsequent year, knowing that there was already $1 million there could affect a judgment about whether another 500,000 or $1 million or whatever would go into it, because it's an annual event, it's not an automatic event. So everyone would be aware of what the total might be and whether it's appropriate to add to it or not.
Before the budget issue, just so you know, before the state's budget issue, our goal this year was to start seeding, and we're gonna come to you with this, start seeding the replacement, no pun intended, of the Sheehan Field. By putting in money in this account a little bit this year and try to grow that over time so we would not have to come back to you for a bond. So that was our goal. Unfortunately, best laid plans.
Well, I think I like the transparency, because you're basically coming forward and saying, look, you know, this money we want to put in, this is what we've kind of earmarked it for, and we understand there could be some level of flexibility if something changes. But I mean, I think if you go back far enough, what used to happen when we had money left over? We would exhaust it before the end of a fiscal year because we didn't want to have it left over, and that's not the most efficient way to handle the money, because you're buying a bunch of stuff so you don't end up with the same amount of money or a lesser increase because, well, you had this money left over, so you buy reams and reams of paper just because you want to get rid of it. This allows you to direct the money to something specific and be transparent to us and the public. Hey, this is, you know, we had money left, this is what we want to earmark it for, rather than exhausting it on something that we'll eventually use, but it's probably not the most efficient use of it. So, you know, I definitely support it, and I appreciate the transparency. So, I mean, I wanted clarification on that 1% thing, is it threw me a little bit. I said, all right, wait, so I want to make sure I understand it. So now I understand it better.
Jason, you're exactly right, and it gives the central office team the gift of time, that they're not constricted to a June 30th deadline to spend this money, but to be thoughtful and think about really what's needed in the district and how to best get the biggest bang for their buck, if you will. So you're exactly right.
No, and that's why Wallingford does it the best way, because, you know, we're trying to be smart about the money we've got because we don't have an endless supply of it. So I think it's great. So I appreciate the transparency. Thank you very much.
and just to add on to that, Councilman, there's a danger there when you're pre-buying. And it's not just a school thing, it could be a general government thing as well. But just to take the school, since this is a subject at hand, if, let's say, you had $500,000 and on anticipated left over, and on June 25th, you're starting to buy $500,000 worth of stuff for the new year. Well, what happens next year, and you only have $100,000 left over? You left yourself $400,000 in the hole.
You just described my first year in Wallingford.
Yeah, I know. And we've worked to, I think we worked well to try to wean us off of that. I don't know if that's a good way to explain it or not. But this is not a Wallingford thing, and it's not a school thing as well. It's a general it's a government thing. It happens at the federal level, sometimes it happens at the state level. And the inefficient spending, the wackadoo spending, just to so you don't lose it is crazy sometimes.
Oh, I know that it's available elsewhere. I'm sure they don't do it as good as we do.
Yeah. Well, of course not.
Councilor Marone.
Mr. Chairman, so my question is around I understand that the statute says that we can't reduce the Board of Education budget from year to year, correct? So if we take this money and set it aside now, it's been allocated in this current budget year. So would this then count towards the money that we can't reduce next year?
You mean if you, I just want to make sure I understand the direction you're going. If you don't approve it, it's going to end up in the reserves of the town, the free reserves.
Right.
And at a future time, the school board would have to go, through the charter provisions, going through the mayor's office first, and then to the council to appropriate it. At that time, I'm going to say the council can direct what's going to happen, because the books are closed on that, and it has not entered the 1% fund. It's new money, if you will. So if you said if the school said, yeah, geez, guys, we really need that 700 grand for special ed.
Right, but my question is this money's been out, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I think you asked if money is appropriated, but it's not all spent, does that mean that year we've fallen, we are in violation of the MBR?
Well, or if the following year we allocated this year's expense minus 750,000, are we then in violation?
Well, I don't think you can allocate money that we don't have.
Yeah.
So if the school board had the money in a 1%, I don't think that could be looked at as an appropriation of the town at that point. It would be a fine point, and it might result in some argument over it, but at that point, it's not an appropriation. They have the money. If they do not spend everything and it's left over in a 1% account, I don't think there's a violation of the MBR because money was appropriated. Whether it was spent or not is a second question. By the same token, again, the following year, if they have money in the 1% account, I'm not sure that counts toward the MBR, though that could be an argument.
That's a good question. I think when is the trigger of the MBR, Dominic? Do you know? Is it at budget time or is it at when the year is over?
I believe it's when you set the budget.
Yeah, that's why
Set the budget, because it's based on the budget, but not the actual expenditure.
Because you don't know what's going to happen during the year. So I think the MBR, and please don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure it happened. The trigger point is when the budget is adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess I have to look to the mayor. Where we are now, the governor's proposing that total hit to Wallingford would be about $19 million. My understanding is that if the Board of Ed retains this money in the 1% account, we can't come back and get any portion of that. Is there a plan? I mean, are we better off holding it? What would you, as the CEO for the town, what would you have us do?
I think given that was appropriated responsibly to the Board of Ed, at this point, it's not going to make a big difference with regard to the crisis. I mean, I think we're expected to be about $14 million in the hole. We will be adjusting our budget. They're holding on to the money, I think, is appropriate given that was what was budgeted. They say that they still need it. I believe that. But they are in the best position to know where they really need the money. And the 14 million becomes a whole other question that will involve all of us in some pretty agonizing decisions, because clearly the town cannot absorb $14 million loss, and that would have to be distributed across education as well as other departments. But the appropriation included that 1% rather than confuse things with what happened to that money. I think that should stay with education.
Okay, thank you. So then, if I can just, to the origins of where this comes from, my understanding is that in the present budget, we're running in the red?
Yes.
Okay. So, and that's $1 million is what I heard. So this is 752. So we are not anticipating using the whole of this money to fill that hole, or we are?
Our goal right now, when we say we're running in the red $1 million in special ed. We're not saying our whole budget is running in the red $1 million. So I want to make sure we're clear on that. So we're still running in a deficit, but not $1 million. So, because we still have our contingency, the board has the contingency funds, which we would put towards this. And then, of course, we have a couple of positions that we haven't filled, so we're kind of moving that over. The area is the fact that we're just concerned that when the other shoe falls, that million is going to go higher.
Now, the $1 million, it's a calculation from this budget.
Right now, as of just this week.
17-18 fiscal year, correct?
For special education.
The majority of that loss is contribution from the state.
It's a combination. It's at the end of the school year, Starting anywhere from May until actually into July, we have annual reviews for students with special needs. And some of those annual reviews occur well after, obviously, you approve the budget, the board is even able to approve it. And in doing so, when those meetings occur, changes in services could increase, and that's what we saw, increases, which then connect to transportation. We also have students moving into district that need additional services. We have this phenomenon every year, and every district across the state has this phenomenon. We're just seeing a spike because in the past, as you just said, we would have gotten more reimbursement from the state, but that wasn't there, in addition to all these other aspects.
Okay, and then if you happen to be level funded on special ed, is there a different intent for the utilization of this money presently?
No, that was, we want to keep it there because we know that this is so volatile. Every single year, anybody who's been on the board knows that special ed is something that goes up and down each month. And so we feel that the worst case scenario, the best case scenario is we don't touch the $700,000 this year and it stays there next year in the event that something happens in special ed. But not to move it to technology, not to move it to a field, we really just see this as an area that's always evolving.
Okay, and then how much is in this, the 1% account now?
The remaining amount right now, I would have to, are you?
Yeah, I'm just, we brought over 374 from prior years.
Okay, so you have $374,000.
Well, no, that's what we brought into this year, and then we used it. We've been using it on those designated items. There's approximately.
Okay, so what's the balance in that account today?
150-ish.
Okay.
So those, as I explained before, what we do is we set up the accounts with the comptroller. So those are all projects that we're exhausting. There's a project going on at Sheehan right now for the HVAC. So that
Scoreboards that we ordered that are, we've put the PO out for. We haven't necessarily paid for them, but we've encumbered the funds.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
Just one point of clarification. You heard us use the term $14 million. I just don't want folks to be confused. We accounted for $4.1 million of the cuts in the budget already because that was the governor's starting point when he released his budget in early February. Then since then, he's gone through a couple of gyrations and Trump-like executive orders and whatnot, which will bring us to the number that Mr. Fishbein spoke of, 18 to 19 million. I believe 18 million being education cost sharing, another million on the general government side. So that's why I just, quick math, 14 million, 15 million was what we're talking, above and beyond what we already sort of budgeted for 17, 18.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the public? There being none, I bring it back to the council. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Fishbein?
Yes.
Laffin?
Yes.
Paterno? Marone?
Yes.
Shortell?
Yes.
Sullivan?
Yes.
Testa? Zandri?
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And we'll keep you posted.
Thank you.
Also.
So, Mr. Bose, I understand you learned there was some discussion.
Oh, yes, just quickly, I just wanted to inform the council. I did run into Mr. Gross as I was running here. We almost ran into each other, literally. And I addressed a couple of his questions, just so that you know on the record, especially the one about passive investment versus, a more active style. And I talked to him a little bit about that. So, when we do get to come before you, and then he asked, are we going to come? And I said, yeah, I think we were waiting for summer and year-end results on a fiscal basis was the last I remembered. So maybe I can communicate with you if that's all right, and we'll establish a decent time for everyone. At a regular meeting, I'm assuming? A regular council meeting?
Sure.
Okay, very good. I'll get back to you at that.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me put that on record.
Thank you. I think we have nothing for item 9, and we're on to item 10.
I move we go into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statute Section 1-225F and Section 1-206B regarding strategy and negotiations with respect to the following pending litigation: Walmart RE Business Trust, First Town of Wallingford, and Bristol Myers Squibb Company versus Town of Wallingford.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the council in executive session. The public has cleared the council chambers. Thank you. Call the meeting back to order.
Mr. Chairman, I move we come out of executive session.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the council back in public session. Mr. Vice Chairman.
I move we authorize the settlement in the pending tax appeal matter of Walmart RE Business Trust versus Town of Wallingford as discussed in executive session.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. There being no more business on the agenda, a motion to adjourn is appropriate.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare this meeting adjourned.